What's up, guys? It's Paloma Elsesser, and I want you to come under the cover
Come
with
under
me
the cover with me. Under the cover.
at Climax Books. You know, when you're a kid, you don't really have access to a phone, and if you, outside of play, all you have is your imagination. And I was a bit less tactile, I was a bit more cerebral, so I think books offered me a lot of refuge from a very young age as a fantasy addict. Boom. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It is not her most famous book, but I would say it's like her third most famous book. But it is a book that my mother gave me that some say inappropriately when I was in the 6th grade, when I came home and I told my mom that I wished I had different hair and different skin and I had blue eyes and I was skinny and all these things, which are the motifs of this book, narrated by a different girl telling the story of desire to have blue eyes. She was a darker skinned black girl growing up in the South, and her desire to have blonde hair and blue eyes and be able to be valued and seen as a human being in the time of segregation. So it's kind of this like dark commentary on a very dark issue as it relates to beauty standards, whiteness, race, identity. And I remember reading this book when I was in the 6th grade and being pretty disturbed, but it made a lot of sense. I remember being maybe in like 11th or maybe 11th grade and seeing this book by Lauren Greenfield. I grew up in Los Angeles. I didn't feel like I grew up with a lot of people that looked like me. So it's funny to see this book that was made in the 90s for teenagers, really illustrating a world that I was in proximity to but never felt a part of. Fun fact, me and Lauren Greenfield, when we shot for Balenciaga, learned that we went to the same high school. It essentially is a commentary on privilege, celebrity, nudity, misogyny, bodily autonomy, what we consider beautiful, what we consider valuable, and how hard it is to be a girl. Look at that. I think that this book, Girl Culture, obviously influenced my own book that I made with my dear friend and photographer, Zora Sicher. It's called Treasure. It is a book documenting 2 breast surgeries that I had over the course of 5 years. It was a really incredible project that we worked on that I knew from the jump that I wanted Zora to be a part of, to ultimately capture the vulnerability of something that I was doing. You can also see me like growing up in these pictures. I also found that this work was really important to me because it had nothing to do with fashion. It had exclusively to do with me having agency and authority of my body. I think a lot of the time people are like, oh, how could you want to get your boobs done or do anything like that? Don't you love your body all the time? But it was actually in response to like that I'm a human being like navigating my body just as anyone else is. Here's 3 of my faves, or ones that I want you guys to know about. This is Nicanor Parra, who is a very famous Chilean poet that I grew up reading with my dad and my grandmother. My dad's side of the family is Chilean and Swiss. They left in the late 1970s because of this little old thing called a coup, and this poet was actually persecuted by Pinochet. This is Talking Back. It's a Bell Hooks book, and I want to just shout out my good friend Isabella Burley because it was a very influential title for the reading program that I developed called Back Talk. And then this is Rena Spalding's. It is, I wouldn't say co-written because it's a multitude of different anonymous members of Bernadette Corporation, which was a gallery, designs, collective studio. And this book is essentially around a character that emerges in like post 9/11 New York, who is, I think, a security guard and becomes a supermodel. So it touches on all these ideas of fame and celebrity and desire and beauty and all the fabulous things that we deal with in day-to-day life. Something that correlates to Treasure is a funny story about this Walter Van Beirendonck book. So when I was in Tokyo, I was in Jimbocho in the books district, and I'm navigating like hundreds and hundreds of books. And this is while Zora and I were doing the layout for this book. And so I pick up this book, and one of the last things that we were waiting on was the response to on email from Orlan, which is an incredible French performance artist who I've been obsessed with since high school, who's always documented her own body modification, which obviously had influence on the book that I made. So I always wanted her to do the introduction, and so we're waiting on her answer. And as we're waiting, I'm flickering through this book, and then I see that this book was in collaboration with Orlan. But yeah, this book has some amazing images all around, again, body, agency, authority, play, wonder. Thing about this picture is that it's like every single time I'm on set, like an adult will be like, can you recreate this moment? And I'm like, no, I cannot recreate this. I think that of all brands ever that I like love and admire, the Comb umbrella is my favorite. Like from a head to toe brand, not just like the clothes themselves, but the imagery, but the text, but the conversation, but the beauty. Like every single detail to me is perfection. This is a book about Kate Bush called Kathy. Some of you may know, some of you may not know, that I am a diehard Kate Bush fan. So it's actually written by her brother, which is really cute and makes me like love this book even more. I have a brother 8 years younger than me, and his name is Patrick, and I have a sister 14 years younger than me. Her name was Kathy. She's famous now, and her name is Kate. Last but not least, this is such an iconic book that I think also needs no introduction but Madonna's sex book. I feel like this book changed the way that I saw like sexual agency of a woman. Like this is the definition of the main character. Madonna is one of my favorite artists of all time, not just because of her music. And yes, Bedtime Stories is my favorite album. Bedtime Stories, erotica, then music. Don't get it twisted. Don't sleep on music, everybody. But yeah, like I think her ability to be in control of her own image was one of, and still remains one of the coolest, most tantalizing things about her. This book was obviously very controversial at the time. I think it's like a young like Italian Catholic woman coming to terms with her own sexuality publicly and championing all these things in the world that people, and especially pop stars, didn't want to touch on, from the AIDS epidemic to sexuality to queerness to femininity to masculinity, and all these things that I think were so cool that she was able to just go off. Mother. Yes, definitely. I had a library card. I also used my library card all throughout elementary school and middle school and high school, but it became very, very important to me when I first started modeling. I would go to castings for like Lane Bryant in the 40s and the 50s, and I didn't have much money to like go sit at restaurants or do anything in between. So where I would go is I would go sit on the stairs, either on the stairs, or if it was freezing, go inside, or if it was hot, go inside of the New York Public Library at Bryant Park.